Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today, we are going to be learning about Psychic Reiki with Brett Bevell from the Omega Institute. And he is, I would describe you as a pioneer in Reiki, discovering unknown abilities or capabilities of Reiki. I have found this book completely fascinating. I told a dear friend of mine yesterday who loves Reiki about this, and I think she bought the book instantly. So I think for anyone who is a Reiki practitioner, it kind of gives you a sense of all the possibilities out there that I don't think we even knew about. So welcome to the show, Brett.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
So I wanted to find out a little bit about psychic. First of all, what is Reiki? And then I've always told, we were sharing before the show, I was almost told that Reiki is a kind of a channel of energy that you get initiated and hooked up with. So I use it akin to someone coming in and giving you internet broadband access. Like you have some type of access to this incredible power that you didn't have before. Power of information in the case of the internet, but I assume power of energy, healing energy through Reiki. So what is it when we get the connection to Reiki? What is it that we're getting access to? Is it healing power generally, divine energy, and how is it different than all these other kinds of channels of energy? I've been doing a show for a while, so I've had like, it seems like there's many different shows, like there's Game
Yeah.
of Thrones and there's, there's all these shows now that you can get on the
Yeah. Yeah.
internet. So I'm not sure, and it seems like there's all these divine energies. I don't know how they're different.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can you explain?
Well, it's a good question and a good starting point. So, I'll start with that. So, there's a concept that I refer to that I call the divine rainbow, in that I believe that there are many different forms of energy healing that are coming from the divine that are available to us now, and even though they're all from the divine, um, each one has its own different flavor, its own different sort of presence to it. So, in my own training, I've trained in Reiki. I've also trained in vortex healing. I'm trained in something I call magical awakening and some other modalities as well. And I just look at them like being different lights on that spectrum of this divine rainbow.
Mm,
So all
mm,
coming from a divine source, but each having a slightly different feel, a slightly different property to it. And Reiki is one of those bands of light.
mm,
Um, Probably the most popular, or maybe the most well known, but certainly not the only form of energy healing. And I think that often there's some confusion around that, where people refer to anything that is energy healing as being Reiki, and I wouldn't say that that's the case. I see it as
mm,
like one specific band of light on that divine rainbow. And it is true that you need to be kind of hooked up to it. Your analogy of being hooked up like to broadband internet's a very good analogy. So traditionally that would happen through what's called an attunement, which is an initiation that a Reiki master gives to the students. At the first degree, that would happen where a Reiki master opens your crown chakra, puts sacred symbols into the crown chakra and also into the hands, which allows the energy to flow out of your hands. At the second degree, if one was to go further into the training, they would receive another initiation, and they would learn three symbols, one of which makes the energy flow stronger, another of which allows you to focus it for mental emotional healing, and a third of which allows you to send it distantly through time and space.
mm-hmm,
And then in the tradition that I learned it, the third level is the master level. So you receive another initiation, and then you learn how to use all the Reiki symbols and the different sequencing of that to basically initiate others. There are some schools that break that into two parts. So for them, it's a 4-degree system. So you'll often hear it referred to as either a 3-degree system or a 4-degree system. I have very good Reiki master friends who learned it as a 4-degree system. And when we share our knowledge, the knowledge is pretty much the same. It's just taught in a different way. And it's not that one way is right or wrong. They're just different ways of sharing the information. And again, you also mentioned the title of my book, Psychic Reiki. What Psychic Reiki is it's really a different way of looking at Reiki, still working with the same energy, but accessing it by communicating directly with that divine intelligence that is in the energy. So
mm,
basically being psychic communication with the energy. And that came to me during a mystical experience that I had in 2007 while I was traveling in Laos. I was traveling by myself and actually finishing the first edits or actually finishing the final edits on my first Reiki book, the Reiki Magic Guide to Self-Attunement. And I was in the former royal capital of Laos called Luang Prabang, which is a beautiful it's really more of a village than a city with these beautiful Buddhist temples there. And while I was there, I got very ill at one point.
Mm.
Felt like my spleen was swollen up like the size of a large grapefruit, had a fever.
Mm.
All the guidebooks said, if you can avoid going to a Laotian hospital, it's best
Mm.
because it's more likely you'll come out of it with something worse than what you went going in.
Mm.
And so I basically just stayed in my room at a guest house and did energy healing on myself for about 2 days straight. At the end of that experience, I had just kind of like a sudden, almost like instant feeling like, oh, I'm okay now. Like it was really very pronounced. And after that experience, went out to have lunch and was going to a small little Indian cafe, ordered my favorite dish, aloo gobi. And while I was sitting there by myself, I suddenly felt an amazing presence in the empty chair next to me, which felt to me like the presence of the spirit of Mikawa Sui. Mm-hmm. And I felt from his presence.
And just for people who don't know, Miko Sui is one of the founder of Reiki energy.
He's the person that all Reiki lineages can be traced back to. He was a Japanese mystic who lived in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And during this experience, I felt a ball of energy come from him and go into the area of my heart chakra. And I really had no knowledge at that point what that was entirely about, other than that it was an interesting experience. In the days and in the weeks afterwards, I started getting downloads of information that eventually became my second book, Reiki for Spiritual Healing. But I still didn't have a full comprehension of what had happened. And it wasn't really until months later that I came to the realization that that ball of energy that came to me was literally an energetic crystal made out of the light of Reiki that was then sitting in front of my heart chakra, and that I could basically send energy healing, send Reiki to myself or to others simply by being in communication with that crystal. At first, for literally the first year or two, I would work by simply just imagining either myself or whoever I was working on inside that crystal. And then it came to me that it didn't have to be that hard, that I could literally just talk to the crystal either with my voice or with my mind and tell it to send energy, and it would. And so it's been an exploration over a number of years, just really learning from this energetic crystal, new forms, new ways of working with the energy of Reiki, and still honoring it. I still teach traditional level workshops here at Omega Institute and elsewhere, and still have great respect for the tradition. But I just see this as another access point, another way of opening up this beautiful energy to those people who may not either have the time or the commitment to be trained in the traditional ways, but could use the healing. So I just see it as a way to bring this light to humanity.
Okay, cool. And so I want to loop back because there's a bunch of questions that both came from listeners and then ones that popped up in my head. So you just going from the beginning, you had mentioned that there are different flavors or different emanations from a rainbow of healing lights. How would you describe the specific nature of the healing light of Reiki?
Yeah, so Reiki for me has a very almost kind of a Zen meditative quality to it. When I'm doing a Reiki session, I feel like it brings me very quickly into a deep meditative state. And that's because, again, in traditional training and also when using the Psychic Reiki techniques, you're receiving the energy as you're giving it because it has to come through you. And so for me, it just feels like this kind of very Zen, kind of empty mind place, very calm, very serene quality to it. Some of the energies that I work with that are not Reiki, don't have those flavors, or they may have them in a different way. So there's a kind of energy that I work with that I call magical awakening that is very playful and actually engages the mind a lot more. So it's not kind of this serene, peaceful place. It's more like being in this kind of playful.
Right. So as a healer, you feel a different kind of felt sense of when the energy goes through you. And then what would you say is the resulting effect of the Zen or the playful or the other modalities that you are able to?
Yeah, so I find, first of all, I find that some people just simply respond better to one than the other. So, a perfect example is I often do energy healing for my wife. And I find that of the things that I'm trained in, what works best when I'm working on her is vortex healing. which I've been trained up through the fifth level. A lot of people that I work with at Omega Institute, in terms of the staff, I'll often do these group healings. A lot of the staff really love the magical awakening energy, again, because I think there's a very playful quality to it, and the staff here at Omega tend to be very playful. At least the seasonal staff do. And Reiki, again, has this very serene, relaxing quality to it, which I think is really beautiful, especially if you're undergoing any kind of stress or even any kind of physical ailment. That the energy just allows you to kind of go into that place of rest, and then allowing the body's own natural healing abilities to kind of kick in, because you can actually let go of the stress that's prohibiting that. So again, it really depends on the person, their own maybe personality even, and what they're open to. So when I'm doing a healing, I kind of, if I'm doing a one-on-one healing, I often tell the individual, look, I have a lot of different possibilities that we can work with. Are you okay with me bringing through whatever wants to come through? So that's often how, when I work with people one-on-one. But again, I would say Reiki is probably the most well-known, probably the most popular. And so for me, with Psychic Reiki, I just really want to kind of get the word out that that it's much easier to access this energy than most people think. And also, even if you are a person who's already trained in Reiki, maybe even already up to the master level, there are certain techniques that Psychic Reiki can undergo that are beyond what are taught traditionally. So there's things about that the Reiki crystal, for example, can give shape to the energy, whereas in traditional Reiki, it's more just a constant flow of the energy. And when you give shape to the energy, that allows you to create what I call Reiki holograms, which are like, almost like replicas of organs or organ systems made out of the light of Reiki and then infused in with the physical body. You can also create sacred geometric forms out of Reiki to intensify the healing and do all kinds of things that traditionally wouldn't be possible in a traditional Reiki.
Okay, so that was one of my other questions. So I'm going to loop back to one of the questions that one of the listeners asked, which is the line of study that you go through Reiki. So as I remember in my Reiki class, there was some, a little bit about the lineage, and then it was a lot about how the techniques of like the process and the techniques and the forewarnings about how to do Reiki in ways that are well boundaried, appropriate, and ways that don't harm the practitioner who is, as you said, is a channel of energy coming in and out of them. So is that the line of study, or when you were talking about studying, was there more? I only know my own Reiki training, which I don't know if it fits all the things that you mentioned, Reiki training 1, 2, and 3. Is that what you're studying in Reiki, or is there anything more?
Well, I mean, that's what I studied traditionally, and then again, I had this experience in Laos a little over 10 years ago, and what it showed me was just that there's more possibilities than what we had been taught before.
Right.
And what I see with that is that as we are evolving as human beings, as our consciousness is evolving, then the energy is showing us, hey, here's some other things that you can do that we weren't shown previously. So I just see it as an evolving healing art. And the Psychic Reiki techniques are just ways that you can add more to your tool belt if you're already trained in Reiki. And if you're not already trained in Reiki, it's just an easy access point for you to be able to access the energy and to use it for yourself and also for healing.
Okay, so I want to go back to another listener question said, what came through you? So you had, so here's what I heard is that there's energy that came towards your heart. You then later discovered it was a crystal. And can you show us like where it is in your heart? And is it the same for every person?
Well, yeah, for me, it's sitting like right in front of the heart chakra, kind of right in front of the center of the chest.
Okay, center of the chest and kind of like right between your collarbones and like I would call it the center point of your chest. So it's in between those places or in between?
Yeah, just literally in front of the center of your chest, maybe like an inch or so in front of your heart chakra. So not... it's like, not actually in the physical body, but just right up.
So like if this is the middle point, it's like right around, is it right around here and in front of me? Okay, got it. So in front of you is this point. And then so that's where it's located. And what you had said is that it is it has energetic crystal made up of Reiki. So it's a crystal. So what as a result of it being a crystal, and I don't know a lot about crystals. I
Yeah,
apologize. Tell
yeah.
me what benefits of a crystal. You'd mentioned one of them is that it gives shape to the energy, so that instead of free flowing, which is a typical Reiki, it's evolved it into kind of more of a ray versus kind of a diffuse. Is that what you
Yeah.
meant by that? Okay.
Yeah, so if you can think of it, maybe a better way to explain it for me would be if you think of just again Reiki and traditional Reiki just being this constant flow of energy. So if you can imagine it, you receive it, it kind of moves through you and then on.
Hmm.
And so when I had this experience with this visitation of Mikao Usui, what happened was that energy, instead of just being a flow, had condensed or crystallized in front of my heart chakra, where it then just remained.
Hmm.
So it's still there with me. And anytime I empower somebody to their own Reiki crystal, I always remind them that they will have it from that point forward. It's not something that's going to expire or dissolve or leave their presence. And once it's there, what it allows the practitioner to do is literally to talk to the crystal, either with their voice or their mind, and and the crystal will then send energy. I often do large group healings here at Omega Institute, sometimes 30, 40, sometimes even more than that. Also do them online through Mind Valley's Silvana, where we'll have up to 200 or sometimes even 300 people worldwide. And the whole healing is just me having a little mental conversation with the crystal, where
Hmm.
I'm just saying, Reiki crystal, please send to everybody's brain and nervous system. Reiki crystal, please send to everybody's digestive system. And it allows you to create these layered healings where the crystal is just sending out these waves of energy to everybody, either in the room or everybody who's listening online. And the response I've had is pretty pronounced, pretty powerful.
Hmm. Okay, so let me make sure I understand. So the
Sure.
crystal,
Yeah.
there's some benefits of just a crystal, which is the focus. Are there any other benefits of having it be a crystal, or is that the primary one? Is the focus and the ability to build other structures, or is that the primary?
Yeah, yeah. So for me, I just see it. Again, when I think of it as a crystal, when I'm using that term, I'm thinking that the energy has crystallized and become permanently in my system. So
Ah,
it's no
so
longer just going.
materialized. I see.
It's
So it's
materialized there,
okay. I
and
get it. Okay.
it's there, and it's a permanent part of my system. There is an interesting story I have to share briefly. So I mentioned that I often do these group healings through Solvana, which is a subsidiary of Mind Valley, an online university for things like this. And there's a woman online who posted a picture that she swears is her Reiki crystal, where she's just sitting in a restaurant. And you know how some people have pictures of orbs and things
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Somebody took a picture of her, and there's this really trippy looking little cluster, looks like a little cluster of little miniature orbs, almost like, those little models that you had in high school and in physics classes of atoms and molecules, where there's all these
Yeah.
little circles, and it's sitting right in front of her heart chakra. And she says, I wasn't wearing anything. She goes, that's my Reiki crystal. So um,
So you can
anyway,
actually see the
yeah,
energetic crystal, like it's like an
yeah,
orb. Like I've seen orbs before, which are energetic things that are floating around. So she took a little selfie in there, not really materialized, but not really material in touching. You could see this crystal.
yeah,
That's
so there's that.
hilarious.
Yeah,
God.
yeah,
Okay, so I want to go back to because people who are not familiar with Reiki, what I understand as the benefits is that if you were to do the traditional Reiki, which a lot of people do, and which you're still a subscriber to, a practitioner of, there are many different, 2 or 3 classes of which I took like 6 days or more of these classes, and so there's information about training. So what you learned is a practice that the initiation just can happen through reading this book. And then the other thing that people may not know about Reiki is in order to send Reiki, at least the rudimentary 1 and 2 level that I know, there
mhm,
is, you direct things from your hands. There's elaborate set of connection processes as well as symbols that you do with your hands. And
mhm,
so there's this kind of more of a process in place.
mhm,
So the
mhm,
psychic Reiki that you describe in your book is much simpler, like simply send
yeah,
energy, psychic energy, please, Reiki energy, please send energy to my spleen. Like done.
right,
Like there's not there's not all these. So that's for people who aren't
yeah,
familiar. That's some of the benefits of this process. Is that right? And as I
yeah,
understand, are there any
yeah,
other benefits from?
I mean, that's totally correct. So really what's happening in psychic Reiki and where I use the term psychic is that Even in traditional Reiki, the belief is that the energy itself has an intelligence, that there's a divine intelligence in the energy that is always working for the highest good. So in Psychic Reiki, what's literally happening is because that the Reiki crystal is sitting in front of your heart chakra, and it's made out of that energy of Reiki. So it has that divine intelligence in it, and you just basically enter into a psychic conversation with that intelligence. And so you're bypassing the traditional symbols, you're bypassing the more complex elements and just asking it, almost like I see it, almost like an energetic form of divine grace, like, please, please send healing to my liver, or please send healing to my kidneys. And simply in you expressing it, whether you're doing it verbally or just with your mind, your Reiki crystal will react to that and just begin sending energy there.
And so is Reiki energy, so I'm trying to figure out, I have a
Sure.
lot of spiritual practices I've learned or tried myself. And so there's sometimes you just ask God, please heal me of this. How is that request different than making a request to Reiki? Is Reiki specifically for healing, or is it if you're I'm trying to figure out if there's a jackknife and
Sure.
Reiki is part
Yeah.
of your energetic jackknife. I know
Yeah.
that there are lots of different types of jackknives that you can use depending on the
Yeah.
personality, what someone likes, etc. What
Yeah.
is it healing? What's the purpose of Reiki?
So Reiki, in the West, Reiki is, I think, primarily seen as a healing modality. But if you go back to the original source of Mikao Usui, it was really more of a path of awakening. So it was about deep spiritual connection. So, and in that, the healing was more of a byproduct. And so it really is both. It is both about healing, but it's also about spiritual growth and going deeper into your own spiritual path. And so the Reiki crystal can help on both of those. So it can help very profound ways in terms of accelerated healing, where you use some of the more advanced tools that I mentioned in my book, such as Reiki cords, Reiki holograms, and really creating these intense experiences energetically that I find really accelerate the healing process. So you can use it for that, for sure. But there are also ways you can use the Reiki crystal on your own spiritual path. You can use it to meditate. You can literally ask the Reiki crystal to bring you into different meditative states, and it will do so. The practitioner, you can ask your Reiki crystal to bring the group that you're working with into different meditative states, and it will bring everybody in the room into a particular meditative state. So you use it to meditate, to bring in a sense of inner peace, to bring in a sense of self-love. Often when I'm doing individual healings, at a certain point, I'll ask my Reiki crystal to literally bring the cellular consciousness of each cell in that person's body into a Reiki meditation for self-love. And I have to admit, ever since I started integrating that into my practice, the acceleration in terms of the positive results that I have for my healings have really kind of gone off the map in terms of people who maybe were really struggling for long periods of time, and then I start bringing this in, and suddenly it's not that they never have a problem, but suddenly their life becomes much more stable and much more on a positive projection.
Right.
So there's ways. There's really quite a few ways to use the Reiki crystal that again are beyond what one would be able to do in traditional Reiki training.
Okay, so I'm gonna loop back to all the things that you mentioned,
Sure.
time permitted, but I want to go from kind of procedural. What happens is first, I need to create the Reiki crystal and materialize it in front of my heart. And so, as your book explains, there is by simply reading and reading this book, meditating and feeling the energy exchange, and then placing my hand on this symbol in a book, instead of like Reiki 1, where I get initiated, Reiki 2, where I basically like close my eyes, read your book, and like seems too good to be true. What's happening here, Brett?
So I'll give you a little history on that first. So back before I ever wrote any books on Reiki, this was in the late 1990s, I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was experimenting with different techniques that were coming to me. And one technique that I was shown through my spirit guides was the idea of sending an attunement through time and space to a particular action. So I actually did an experiment on a particular labyrinth in the San Francisco Bay Area where I sent an attunement through that labyrinth, through the center, intending that it would intersect only with those people who were walking the labyrinth with the intention of receiving it. So basically, it wasn't going to interfere with some innocent soul who's just walking the labyrinth just to walk the labyrinth. But if someone walked the labyrinth with the intention of becoming attuned, then it would attune them. And so then I would tell different people I knew who had no previous Reiki training, I would tell them where the labyrinth was. They would go, they would walk the labyrinth, and then afterwards I would feel their hands, and every time I would feel the Reiki flowing from their hands. So to me, that demonstrated that this technique worked.
You mean you're attuning them to Reiki just like this attunes you to Reiki? I get it. So you're initiating them to the Reiki energy, and just to help listeners who are less familiar with this, you were the internet connection. Like you basically did it through the labyrinth and then through this. Okay, got it. Okay.
And so what I realized over time was that as beautiful as a labyrinth is, that wasn't the necessary component. The important part was that I was sending it through time to a particular action that the person was taking. So in all of my books, actually, there are different attunements. Even in some of my non-Reiki books, there's initiations that happen. And so what I realized over time, I could send it through time to a particular action. So in one of my books, it's by a person reading a certain passage out loud. They will then become attuned. In this particular book, though, I decided to step back and literally tried an experiment again where I empowered the book to its own Reiki crystal. And so you're not receiving the Reiki crystal from me. You're receiving it literally from the book because, again, if you can imagine that Reiki crystal has divine intelligence to it. So it's going to know when you're touching that symbol on there. And then once you do that, it's going to activate it sending you your own Reiki crystal, which is a process that takes maybe 5 to 10 minutes, where it runs a little treatment on you and energetically creates a Reiki crystal in front of your heart chakra.
Okay, so here's what I did. I was pressing it going, do I put my hand on the whole symbol? Do I put both hands on the symbol? Does it matter? So does it matter?
As long as you touch it in whatever way you want to.
Okay. And then sadly, when I placed my hands on this, I fell asleep. Is it still working? How does it work? Do I have to be can I be watching TV and doing this? Like, what should happen?
Well, I mean, I'd probably, it would still work if you're watching TV, but I'd probably want to hold it in a more of a sort of a sacred space.
Right.
But the fact that you fell asleep, to me, actually, that indicates that you were reacting to the treatment, in the sense that people often, when they're receiving energy healing, will often go into a deep space, either deeply relaxed or fall asleep. In my own Reiki training, when I got my first degree back in 1993, I wasn't that energetically sensitive in the beginning, but one thing I would notice is every time I would do the self-treatment, about halfway through, I would always fall asleep. So the fact that you fell asleep almost immediately after you had that experience is just telling me that it worked for you and that it relaxed your energy system enough to where you were able to rest for a little bit. So.
Okay. So now I have, so in theory, I should also, even though you may not be able to take a photo of me and see it, I have a Reiki crystal that I can then create. Like I have a little pen that I can then draw around and draw all these little, okay. So chapter 3 is opening your heart to the divine. And you mentioned that some people may not completely own their divine presence. And so this chapter is really focusing on deepening your connection to the divine. And I wanted to understand a little bit about what you find with clients who are like, so, they walk the labyrinth, you're like, yeah, Reiki's coming out of your hand. They're like, whatever, Brett, you're a friend of mine, but I don't know what you're talking about. See you later.
Right, yeah.
So what is this process of why does one need to do this? Because I assume it's from what you found, and what does doing this do for the client or the practitioner now, or the Reiki recipient of Reiki, I'd say?
Sure. So again, I think Reiki has a beautiful quality to it that helps on your own spiritual path. So in that particular chapter, it's about kind of deepening that connection between you and the divine. And there's a number of tools that are mentioned in the book that you can use to deepen that connection. In terms of my own path, I've found that Reiki has not only been very healing for me on a physical and emotional level, but has really transformed my life in a number of ways. And I find that, and you mentioned this earlier, the idea, what's the difference between Reiki and prayer? And I feel that there's an area of overlap, but there's also an area of difference there. Mm-hmm. So for me, prayer is certainly very powerful and effective, and Reiki can also be very powerful and effective. What to me is different about the two is with prayer, you're certainly just, it's like sending that letter to God or the divine, and just putting it in the divine's hands to manifest things in whatever way they need to be manifested, which again is a very powerful process that I certainly recommend people continue with, if they're
And I
doing it.
just have to comment, is that like a divine angel or a teapot in the background? I hear this loud whistling noise. Or is it me?
Yeah.
Have I gone
No,
crazy?
no, you're hearing it. You're hearing it here. So it's in my office. There's
Okay.
actually the furnace for the whole building is through
Okay.
that door.
All right. Thank you.
Sometimes it makes sound.
I was
Yeah.
like,
Sorry about
okay, am I hearing things
that.
psychically? Is this him? Is he
Yeah.
sending energy? What the heck is happening with that noise? Sorry.
Yeah.
I got it. Okay. So sorry. You're saying the difference between Reiki and prayer. They're different types of things.
Yeah. So I see them as being connected and related. I feel like there's the divine intelligence in Reiki, and that there's certainly it's always working for the highest good. But to me, they just work differently. So with energy healing, what to me is different about energy healing than prayer is that with energy healing, at least as a recipient, I will usually feel, not everybody will, but I know from my personal experience, I will feel a palpable energy when I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
also as a practitioner, I will usually sense a palpable energy. So a perfect example will be, when I do these group healings, again, when I'm doing it in person and there's 30 people in a room, and I'll do these group healings, and usually about halfway through, most people are out. A lot of people are snoring, and like you can tell,
Wow.
look in the room and say, okay, this is having a very profound effect on people. If I was to sit in front of a room full of people and begin praying for them, I think it would still have a positive effect, but I don't know that I would notice it that much on this physical plane. And I'm not saying that prayer
Ah.
can't have a powerful effect on the physical plane. It certainly can. But in terms of my own development as a healer and as a spiritual being, when I opt to use the energy healing, I will notice a very profound, palpable effect
Mm.
in time. Whereas I think with prayer, it's a little more subject to wherever spirit's wanting that to go, and that could be this life, another life. It could be,
Ah, I see. God. So it's like about presence right now. It's kind of a
yeah,
healing right now, healing now, please,
yeah,
versus like who knows that with that prayer, I'm not sure what's
yeah,
happening. So it has a kind of an arc to it that's a little bit different than prayer. So then
yeah.
in this, you talk about uh, deepening your connection to the divine consciousness within the Reiki crystal. So I assume that is it like just believing that what am I doing? Believing that the Reiki crystal is actually working, or what is it? So I'm going to read through this, and then perhaps you can
Sure.
tell us what.
Yeah,
I'm going to read a passage so people also have an example of what the book
sure.
includes. So it says,
Yeah.
the Reiki crystal inside of this book, because you said this book is charged with the Reiki crystal
Mhm.
itself, is now creating a Reiki portal in this paragraph connecting you with divine laughter, which you believe is a way to, that divine laughter is, well, help me explain what divine laughter is and from your perspective.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I just see divine laughter almost like kind of connected to that energy of Om, that primordial sound that created the universe. And but divine laughter being like the joyful aspect of that
Ah,
part that just kind of emanating throughout time and space in terms of the joy of creation. And
okay.
and so for me, using a Reiki portal to connect to that, again, for me, I actually feel that in a palpable way when I'm rereading that passage in the book.
Okay.
Uh,
So,
yeah.
and for those who are not familiar with the concept you talk about in the book, a divine portal is a connection with the crystal and some physical thing outside of it. So, give an example of a
Mhm.
portal. Like I could be connected to like the pyramids in
Yeah,
Egypt, right?
exactly. So the idea of a Reiki portal came to me a number of years ago. Actually, if you even in traditional Reiki, if you think of the symbols that you learn in second degree, there's one of them that allows you to send energy through time and space.
Right.
And in my mind, I'm always like, oh, okay, that's a Reiki portal. And so
Ah.
so what the crystal's doing is it's basically using that innate power in that symbol to create energetic portals, not just for sending Reiki through time and space, but to open up portals between yourself or whoever you're working on and other healing aspects in the universe. So that could be connecting to an angel, that could be connecting to an avatar.
Okay, got it. So, and who,
particular temples, such as the pyramids of Egypt or another holy
right,
place.
so it's just developing a connection from, in this case, this paragraph within this book that has a crystal
Mhm.
around it with some, and what is it that I'm connecting with? Is it divine love in this paragraph, or what is it that you're asking in this case?
In this particular connection, is with divine laughter, which again I just
Ah, okay, got it.
as
So
having a
it's a
kind of a joyful presence to it. But you could use the Reiki crystal to create a Reiki portal, literally to anything you wanted
ah,
to.
okay. So it could be a concept like divine laughter.
Concept,
Which, of
yes.
course, now that I've described divine laughter in this detail, I've taken all the joy out of the very nature of this paragraph. However, let me attempt to start over again. Okay, so allow yourself. So, the Reiki crystal inside this book is now creating a Reiki portal. So, now we understand in this paragraph connecting you with the divine laughter, which is, you're saying, the joyful part
Yeah.
of divine spirit. Allow yourself to simply rest your eyes here. So, when I read it, I'm like, should I just stop reading here? But then it says stop reading. I'm like, I can't stop reading because I just started reading those words. This is what happened to me. And allow
Yeah.
yourself to be bathed in divine laughter. Okay, wait, should I stop now and read divine laughter? And then I was like, but there's more words. It says, let your presence, yourself be in the presence energetically and to sink deeply into it. Let it soak into your mind, into your bones, and into each organ and cell within your body. Feel it flow into your thoughts and the space between each thought. Feel it roll over every muscle and into your throat and into your lungs. With the next breath you take, allow this divine laughter to come to you through your nose and your mouth. Let it flow through your ears and come in through your eyes and all that you see, including this page, your fingers, and anything you see in the background behind this book. Know you're not alone, that you've never been alone, never will be, or ever will be. And this divine laughter has been with you and is part of you always. Even if you don't see it or know it, that divine presence has been there. It is our own illusion and confusion that leads to feeling separate from the divine. Now allow yourself to feel the divine laughter flow into the illusion and, confusion. And so there's this paragraph, and then I thought, wait, is it happening? Wait, should I be should I be doing the things that it says? So let it be in the presence energetic and seep. So do I need to like sink deeply into it? Okay, now should I go back reading it? Let it soak into your mind. Should I think about soaking into my mind and then reading into? I'm not really sure what to do. So then, in fact, my whole reading of this paragraph gets me out of
Yeah.
probably the state that you're hoping to get me into. And for in the case that there are other people like
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
how does one read this and know if they're doing it quote unquote right?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd say there's probably no one right way to do it. For me, what I was trying to say is just kind of that the energy is literally coming through the page, and just kind of stop and just be present with it. And certainly, yeah, if you're distracted by the fact that there's words after that and you keep reading, certainly there's nothing wrong with that. But just to know that there's energy coming through the page, and if you just kind of want to sit, almost like letting your eyes be in a soft glance at the page, so that you're not so much trying to read or analyze the words, but you're just kind of letting the energy come through. Was really my intention with it. But again, there's no wrong way to do it. With a lot of this work, I see it as being very, very playful, and also just seeing the divine intelligence and the energy, that knowing that we have our own flaws and our own limitations, and I really trust that the divine wisdom of the energy will move beyond that. That even if we aren't doing it perfectly, that it will still get to us in the way that it's meant to show up.
Okay, so my whole reading this previous and just now, if I'm like, is it working? Wait, did I connect? Wait, I'm like trying to make a phone call, like, hello, hello, hello. This is going to be the equivalent experience. So you're saying, like, whatever happens when I'm reading this, and if I stop or don't stop, the energy is still flowing. It's like I've turned
Yeah,
on just by mere virtue of my
yeah,
eyes reading this page, the light has been flipped on and this work is being done, regardless of the machinations of my mind that worry about whether I'm doing it right, if
yeah,
I should be visualizing this, do I need to stop? It says to stop. I haven't stopped. You know, don't, even
yeah.
if that's happening, it's still working by virtue of reading this page. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. All
Yes.
right. So there's a whole bunch of different, in this one, there's a whole bunch of different ways of connecting. And then you have one that's a psychic, a Reiki self session that you talked about doing in a group where you were mentioning things like ask your Reiki crystal to send Reiki to your brain and your nervous system. Then allow a minute or so, moving on to the next request. And this is just like you have a script of like all the
Mhm.
different ways that you can send healing energy to yourself on a body level, a physical, energetic level. In all cases,
Mhm.
just sending energy to yourself with this Reiki energy. And I presume that, like if I'm pressed for time, I can
Yeah.
just do like my knees hurt. So, okay, I'm
Oh,
going to
sure.
read the one and it does
Yes.
because this is kind of and this is what I think is happening when I'm reading this is that there's kind of an inventive fun way of doing things, which is kind of freedom, fun, flow. Just ask the Reiki crystal to do anything. Reiki crystal, play, take away the wrinkles from my face. Ah, like whatever, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm basically asking the Reiki crystal to apply its healing energy. I don't have to read all 10 of these things. I
Right.
only read the ones that I want. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then similarly, there's a Reiki session for another person. And there are a couple of instances in here. You have group things where people are sitting in the room. I assume they're giving your tacit permission to
Mhm.
proceed.
Yeah.
And I want to talk to you a little bit about boundaries. When you send energy to other people, how do
Yeah.
you know that you have consent? So you talk about one in which you can send it in family lineage. And I was like, oh, good, I'll do it for me and my husband's family. And then I read, oh, no, but you have to ask for your husband, someone in that family lineage, to give consent. And I thought, oh, okay, that's right. I think I think it's really hard when you're working with these systems that are so permeable. How does
Yeah.
one know what are appropriate boundaries? And I've seen people go, let's see if we have your friend's permission. Oh, we do. And I'm like, well, come on. Like, unless you
Yeah.
call them on the phone, do you really? Like, how does one deal with this
Yeah.
permission idea?
Yeah, so for me, I am very much of the thought that it's important to have a person's permission. And I know maybe not everybody in the world of energy healing would agree with me, but I think it's important to have consent. And, so I do try to kind of drive home that concept when I'm teaching, even when I'm teaching traditional Reiki classes. Um, that being said, I don't think everything's black and white. If I was in a car crash and the people in the car with me were all in a coma suddenly, it's not like I'm not going to try to send Reiki to them. I'm just going to do what feels
Hmm.
right in the moment. But the reason I think that the issue of permission is important is because sometimes I've seen people get into patterns that I think are kind of dysfunctional, where they're, instead of dealing with the family stuff that comes up, they're secretly sending energy healing to a family member or a coworker or whoever, trying to change that person without their consent, as opposed as
I've
opposed
seen
to
that a
healing,
lot, actually. Yeah.
and
That's
also just
manipulation.
exactly. And also for me, just in terms of, I tend to be very energetically sensitive. There may be people in the world who are energetically sensitive who've never been trained in Reiki. And if you just start throwing energy at them and they feel their liver heat up, they might think, oh, I need to go to the emergency room. They may not know what's going on.
Ah.
So I think it's just important to have consent when you can. That being said, I think when you're sending energy to a situation, I feel that's different than sending to an individual.
Hmm.
So, for example, and I think many healers in the world will often send energy out into the world, just saying, we're sending this out into the world for world peace.
Hmm.
I think that's fine. That energy is going to go where it needs to go and using its own divine intelligence. I think that would be very different than me trying to send Reiki to Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin or whoever else are major players on the world stage, which I wouldn't do since I don't have their consent. But I think it's very different to be able to send energy healing just towards a situation rather than to an individual. So for situations, I think it's fine. To individuals, I would say it's important to have a consent. When we're talking about, family lineages and things like that, when you're really kind of working with the ancestral lines and things like that, I think that would be important to at least have some consent from some family member in that
Hmm.
lineage.
So, like,
But
so let's say that I'm like I'm sending love to all of the people who are listening to this show,
yeah.
but is that a violation because they didn't ask for my love? So,
So
should I be
what
sending love if they don't want it? I don't
I
know.
feel that there's a difference between just sending love and sending energy healing. And again, for me, part of
Uh,
that, the palpable presence of the energy healing. So if somebody is sending love to me, I think that's great and I'll accept it. But if somebody's sending energy healing to it, I will literally feel it in my body somewhere. I'm just speaking for myself, but I think a lot of people will. Also, for me as a practitioner, when I'm sending distant healing to somebody, I tend to get a lot of impressions that are almost like having
Oh.
a camera on that person. So when, do I have the right then to just put that psychic camera on anybody without their consent? I don't believe I do. So I feel like it's important to have consent in that way. So again, sending love to somebody, I think that's great. And I don't feel like you need that. I don't think you need consent to pray for somebody either. But when it comes to energy healing, I do feel like there's a very palpable physical thing that's going on. And so
So
that's why I recommend.
let's say a friend of mine has cancer, and I just want to send her love. If I'm just going, I love you, and I'm sending you love, Brenda, it's different than I'm like, I love you, and I'm sending healing energy to you, Brenda. So that's the differentiation. Is just generic
Yeah,
love
exactly.
versus a
Yeah.
healing and an intent to heal as well.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. And I
interesting.
think, certainly, your friends may say, yeah, please send me some energy healing. And in that case, I think it's great to do
Yeah,
that.
it would
But
be different if I said,
yeah,
Brenda, are
yeah,
you okay if I send you energy
yeah,
healing? And if she said
yeah,
yes, then I'd be like, great. Or like, because sometimes I've seen in Facebook people saying, my grandmother's not well, please send her energy healing. Then I'm not sure because it's not your grandma. It's your grandma, not
yeah,
you. Like, what
yeah,
am I supposed to do? I'll send you,
yeah,
but you didn't ask me. So I'm like, I don't know what to do with this Facebook post. It just, God
yeah,
bless you. I send love. And then I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't send love. Um, But I think it's the difference between healing and these are my own personal psychosis.
yeah,
So we'll
yeah,
continue, but I think that it's important to understand boundaries. I think because
yeah,
oftentimes what I've noticed is people don't. They send healing energy when it's not requested, and which I
yeah,
think is wrong because that's not
yeah,
their path. So
yeah,
okay, so another thing I wanted to ask, so you actually, and in the next 4 minutes, I want to ask about some of these other ideas. You have this idea, another novel idea of a Reiki meditation journey. So you can take your crystal and connect it to images, which I thought are lovely. You have a bunch of images in here, and you connect to this image so that your consciousness can merge to the Reiki consciousness. Um,
hmm
and, and and why does an image help? Because as I understand it, I could also say, Reiki, I want to merge with your consciousness, not look at an
sure.
image and have that
Yeah,
same thing happen. What's the
yeah.
purpose of having an image?
The image is just a way to, as the writer, to just bring focus to it. So it's just a
Uh,
way to kind of hone in and bring a visual focus.
okay. And
But
what
certainly,
happens when you have a visual focus with it?
well, I think, so sort of to backtrack and use the example of when you were reading the passages, there was that sense of, oh, I want to keep reading the next word. But when you got the smiley face and it's saying, look at the smiley face, then you're just looking at the smiley face and you're not necessarily jumping on to the next passage. So again, it was
Uh,
just a little, as a writer, like, oh, let's put an image in there and it'll bring focus, or it'll bring the intention of the person who's reading to just kind of, look at that and then engage on that level.
okay. And when I'm looking, okay, and here's another one that you have, which is, I don't know if you can see it. This is an
Yeah.
image to, it's kind of like a booster. Like if you wanted to give extra
Yeah.
boosting charge to whatever Reiki that you're doing, it seems like,
Yeah.
wouldn't I always turn it on high and do extra boosting all the time? Why am I not doing this all the time to my life? But, but I assume that this is, this is, I assume, in like, because me and always high, turn everything high, run everything hot, drive 100
Yeah.
miles per hour, is I
Yeah.
assume that this is used in certain specific instances. So that I don't misuse this, what is this meant to do?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just in those instances where you just need extra energy for something, and it will, it's kind of like in the movie This Is Spinal Tap, where they turn the knob up to the volume up to 11. So that's the
Okay.
Reiki version of that. It's going to be just more intense when you use that, what I call the Reiki crystal grid.
Okay. And so with this Reiki crystal grid, I'm assuming like, what I know from NLP is that if you really want to have something be a true part of your being, it's
Mhm.
important to look at it, feel it, say the words to it out loud. So you have like a 5 cent or 4 sensory mapping of like
Mhm.
what it is. Is that But I'm hearing from you, it's like, no, it doesn't matter. I could be like jogging on the treadmill and doing this. I mean, it'll probably be, is there a difference if I do it that way or any other way?
I mean, I think certainly the more focus you can give to it, the better. Like again, you mentioned earlier, should I do this when you're watching TV?
Right,
I mean, you could, and it would still have some effect. But I think the more focused that you can be on it, the deeper the experience will be for you. You
right.
know.
And the last couple of minutes, I think we have 2 more minutes. There's a whole bunch of other things in there. There's connecting to angels. There's creating, and it's like it's almost like it's your imagination is. It's up to you to decide all the different kind of structures you can create to
Hmm.
connect you to some other energy. So many fun things in this book. Thank you so much for being here. We've been talking to Brett Bevell and his book. Psychic Reiki. And tell us about your website if we want to buy the book and learn more about your healing
Sure.
sessions.
Yeah, so my website is brettbevell.com. That's BRETTBEVELL.com. There's also a contact the author button if you want to send me a message. You can also, send me a message on Facebook. And the book is available at bookstores around the world and also through Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and other online retailers.
And how do we get, if we want to be part of your healing sessions, is that possible? Or is there a fee? Is it free? How does one be part of
So
this 200
yeah,
person group?
so I will often do group healings through Solvana, which is a subsidiary of Mind Valley, which is like an online holistic university. It's very much like Omega Institute, but it's all online.
Yeah, cool.
And so through Solvana, they often have these webinars that happen a few times a month. I'm a frequent presenter on that.
Hmm.
There's also some of the recordings that if you become a member of Solvana, you can go in and hear the ones that I did in May and June and
Oh,
July, and
cool.
as well as some other presenters. So that is a monthly fee. I think it's $19 a month that they charge, but you can try a free trial that I think goes for a couple weeks, so you could at least get a taste of it and see if it's something
Yeah,
that you
check.
want to continue with
Cool.
or not.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me on your show.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show and would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.